For a perfect example of why historical preservation is so vital to keeping local history alive, look no further than the Loray Mill in Gastonia, North Carolina. Originally opened in 1901 in the small textile town of Gastonia, the mill was the largest textile mill in the United States at over 1 million square feet. After going into bankruptcy in 1930, Firestone bought the mill in 1935 and it operated as the Firestone Mill for nearly 60 years, closing its doors in 1993. It is said that before shutting the doors, the mill had one employee left and one supervisor on the payroll. Although the property exterior features had already been in decline for some time, it sat vacant from 1993 until 2016, falling into further disrepair. To people like me who grew up in the 1990s, the mill was the massive six-story brick building with busted-out green windows and tall grass all around it. In 2003, Firestone donated the building to Preservation NC, a non-profit organization that restores and protects places of historical significance in North Carolina. Plans were made to redesign the space, but the recession of 2008 derailed those plans completely. In 2013, Preservation NC made a deal with JBS Holdings, a venture capital firm out of California, for JBS to take over the property and use federal funds alongside a $22 million loan. The space would be made into luxury apartments, but also include a history museum preserving the past of the mill, as well as the Gaston County textile industry's heritage. This was a controversial decision to many residents in Gaston County due to the memorable events that some older residents consider a dark stain on the city's history. To others, it is in the best interest of everyone of all ages to know their local history and to preserve what we can of it, especially when that history involves an event that put the small town of Gastonia on the international map. In the early 20th century, textile mills that had dominated the northern economy began to move south to take advantage of cheaper labor force. Loray Mill was the first southern mill owned by a northern entity, and that would play a role in small town politics when the most influential event in Gastonia's history unfolded in 1929. During World War I, the textile mill industry grew rapidly due to weapons and materials being needed. This increased jobs and pay for the duration of the war, but the boom ended with the war and the mill owners quickly looked for ways to cut costs. This journey to cut costs led to the stretch-out system. The stretch-out system doubled the workload of mill employees while increasing hours and lowering pay. Since many mill workers were women, children were often left at home to fend for themselves. In the absence of any child labor legislation, those children eventually would forego any education and come to work to help put food on the table. Employees were already impoverished, and the stretch-out system made pay and the unsafe working conditions even worse than they already were. The National Textile Workers Union, a communist-led labor union from Massachusetts, saw an opportunity to organize the disgruntled workers and finally gained that long sought-after foothold in the Bible Belt South. After a meeting on March 30th, 1929, workers voted to go on strike for better working conditions and wages. On April 1st, 1929, workers officially went on strike. After mill owners evicted many of them from the mill village and fired 5 workers, some of the workers were forced to go back to work, but the strike continued. Tensions began to rise when the NTWU headquarters were destroyed and armed strikers started taking shifts to defend it afterwards. After production started back up at the mill, workers protested outside the mill while the night shift reported to work on June 7th. Sheriff's deputies were called and they attacked workers, sending them away. Later that night, Police Chief Red Adderholt and his officers arrived at Union headquarters to demand that workers hand over their weapons. After they refused, the officers raided the office with no warrant and a violent conflict broke out, in which Chief Adderholt was shot and killed. 70 strikers were indicted on murder charges. All but 16 were released when a mistrial was declared. The court case that ensued made international headlines extending all the way to Moscow. In addition to Chief Adderholt, there was only one other casualty of the strike. Ella Mae Wiggins was a textile worker, single mother of 9, a key strike leader, as well as a well-known singer of ballads lamenting working-class struggles. On the afternoon of September 14th, Wiggins and other strike leaders were on the way to a union meeting when a large group jumped out of a truck and opened fire on the vehicle Wiggins was riding in. She was killed, and 5 mill workers were tried for her murder, but all were acquitted in March of 1930. Thanks to Preservation NC and their efforts to preserve the memory of such an important piece of local history, the Loray Mill has not only been restored and repurposed into luxury loft apartments, but the museum on the premises offers a glimpse for all generations into the important history of an event that put Gastonia on the map.
We leave our homes in the morning, we kiss our children goodbye. While we slave for the bosses, our children scream and cry. And when we draw our money, our grocery bills to pay, not a cent to spend for clothing, not a cent to lay away. And on that very evening, our little son will say, I need some shoes, mother, and so does Sister May. How it grieves the heart of a mother, you everyone must know. But we can't buy for our children, our wages are too low. It is for our little children that seem to us so dear. But for us nor them dear workers, the bosses do not care. But understand, all workers, our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers.